Hi everyone! Welcome to the Archive of Sofia. My name is Amy. If it's your first time here, I would recommend checking out my short intro video down in the description below. This video is going to be a deeper dive into my spiritual journey. As I've said before on the channel, I grew up Christian. The thing is, Christian is a very broad term, and that can mean a lot of different things to different people. I specifically grew up going to churches that were Assemblies of God. For those who are not familiar with the Assemblies of God denomination, I'm going to give some fancy terms that fit Assemblies of God. One of those terms is Protestant, and Protestant simply means it's not Catholic. So if you're thinking very hierarchical and very structured, liturgical type services and religion, that's not what I grew up in. Assemblies of God is much more free-flowing. Another term that fits Assemblies of God is evangelical. And evangelical basically means they have a very strong emphasis on outreach, reaching out to others and sharing their faith, whether that be local or international. A big emphasis is being able to save others from going to hell. The last term I'm going to mention that relates to Assemblies of God is Pentecostal. A Pentecostal denomination believes that there are spiritual gifts that are alive and working today. So spiritual gifts may include prophecy, divine healing, and especially speaking in tongues. At least the way I was raised, and this may not be true for everyone, but the way I was raised is speaking in tongues is essentially angels coming to give you words that you don't have. So if you're trying to come to God and you want to pray about something and you don't know what to say, this sense will kind of overwhelm you and you'll kind of just come out with what's called speaking in tongues, which basically, frankly, just sounds like gibberish. Growing up, I went to church nearly every Sunday, and often I would also go on Wednesdays as well. For a while growing up, I attended Awanas at a Baptist church, and Awanas is just the kid group. And then later, as I got a little older, I went to a different Assemblies of God church than the one that I attended on Sundays for missionettes, which is also just another kid group. When I got older, I attended youth group at my home church. I also sometimes attended youth group at another non-denominational church. I also sometimes would attend Wednesday services at that same non-denominational church. So even though my main background is Assemblies of God, I do have a little bit of Baptist in there, some non-denominational as well. I don't think many Christians would phrase it this way, but my upbringing was definitely centered around the fear of hell. They would never say it that way. They would say, oh, we're sinners and we need to be saved. Well, you need to be saved so you're not going to hell. So one of my memories as a kid is I was sleeping on the top bunk. I was in the top bunk bed. And I remember just having this question of like, okay, if you were to die today, where would you go? And I just remember being like, I don't know. And this very significant fear just filling me. And I remember kind of starting crying, and I got out of bed and I went and found my mom and we talked about it and I prayed the sinner's prayer. And that was the first time I accepted Jesus into my heart. Again, I'm not all that familiar with the nuances of other denominations, but growing up, there was an emphasis on having a personal relationship with Jesus. So it wasn't just read your Bible and go to church and do the right things, but pray and talk to God. I was raised God, Jesus, Holy Spirit. That's the Trinity. It's all the same entity. Those names can be used pretty interchangeably. For as long as I can remember, my faith and spirituality was important to me. I didn't just go to church because I had to. I wanted to go to church. I wanted to get closer to God. Church was often an emotional experience. If you're not familiar with contemporary Christian worship, it may be a bit surprising, but a lot of times there is a full band. You'll do a good half hour of songs. People will raise their hands. They'll clap. Some will go out in the aisles and dance. Growing up, my church had ribbons and flags of different colors, so we also kind of learned colorology, which is something I'm relearning now in my more pagan experimentation that I've been doing. Also, not just colorology, but the whole concept of having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, to me, is so much like, okay, I'm creating a relationship with a spirit guide. Another similarity really is that speaking in tongues. I was very shocked when I was at a group meditation and someone started essentially speaking in tongues, and I'm like, what is this? And they're like, oh, that light language was beautiful, da 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 da. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's another term for speaking in tongues. Like, that's exactly what they were doing. Christians, at least how I grew up, like to say, here we are, and then there you are, and you need to be fixed and believe what I believe in order to be saved. But the more I'm getting into different spiritual practices and trying out different things, there's so much overlap, and it just goes by different terms. Even as a kid and growing up through high school, my faith was always important to me. So much so that I knew I wanted to go to a Bible college. The main reason was to study what I actually believed for myself and understand more internally why it is that I believe what I believe. Overall, my experience in college was a very positive one, and I had studied and planned to become an ordained pastor within the Assemblies of God. Some weird things kind of happened my senior year, and after some consideration, I decided not to actually get ordained. By the time I graduated, I actually had more questions, doubts, and frankly concerns than I did going in. I felt like churches were run much more like a business rather than a family. I personally identify as a straight cis female. Nonetheless, I also struggle with the idea that homosexuality is a sin. That was a big issue for me. I also had a really big issue with God condoning multiple mass genocides in the Old Testament. Right before I graduated, I did a ministry internship helping out a pastor in San Francisco. I remember asking that pastor, so do you think homosexuality is a sin? And I remember him pausing and saying, my understanding of the Bible is that homosexuality is a sin, but I hope I'm wrong. And that sparked something huge in me. Like, what if we are wrong about that? To be honest with you, there are Christian denominations out there that fully accept homosexuality and don't see any of the LGBTQ community to be wrong or a sin. But his statement of, yeah, I believe it's a sin, but I hope I'm wrong. It was just like, okay, so what if we are wrong about that? How much have we mistreated these people who identify that way? What else could we be wrong on? And that just really stuck with me. Nonetheless, after I graduated, I did move around to some different places, but I always found a church to still be a part of, but it never really felt the same. I still kind of just ignored a lot of my questions and just kept on going. Eventually, I met who I thought was the love of my life, and we got married, and eventually he asked me for a divorce, and that absolutely shattered me. Going through a divorce was the hardest thing I've had to do in my life. Thankfully, we did not have children, so it was relatively simple. My parents were very supportive of me and really helped me a lot through that difficult time. Going through the divorce triggered a significant identity crisis. Who am I without being a wife? What are my own interests and passions without taking his preferences into consideration? It was like everything was stripped bare. And with how important and significant my faith and spirituality has always been to me, it was inevitable that an identity crisis would lead to a crisis of faith. And I tried to look into other denominations that were more open-minded. I tried to visit different churches and get more involved, but nothing felt right. And frankly, I had felt like I had done everything right. This guy I had met several years after college, and he was my first boyfriend. He was my first kiss. He was my first everything. I had dressed modestly. I had waited until I was ready to be married. I had followed that purity culture I was raised in, and yet I still got screwed over. I felt like God had betrayed me. And so initially I did try to find a denomination that more accurately fit my own personal beliefs, but nothing still felt right. And so I put that all aside and just focused on myself and just finding other interests. For those of you who are experiencing doubts or a crisis of faith regarding a religion that they were raised in, whether Christian or not, I wanted to recommend this book, Leaving the Fold, a guide for former fundamentalists and others leaving their religion. I do just want to clarify that this book does center around there being no God, no spirit, no nothing out there, which I don't believe with. Nonetheless, there's still a lot of very helpful insights in here as you're going through the process of stepping away from a religion that you've been indoctrinated into. A couple years after that, I finally was at a point that I wanted to explore other possibilities. And I think it took me so long because a lot of these things I decided to try out. I grew up believing they were evil, that they were inspired by demons. Things like crystals and learning about their different properties, things like reading tarot and oracle cards, things like deep meditations and meeting different spirit guides, even things like practicing Tai Chi. These were all considered very taboo. I remember struggling with my first tarot deck because one of the 4 suits is called Pentacles, and they would have a pentacle star on there, and that was very demonic as well. So I remember feeling very uncomfortable. And it's so funny because just the other day I got a new tarot deck, and sometimes the suits can go by different names. Another common name for pentacles is coins. And so just the name of coins kind of disappointed me a little bit, but the coins pictured were just blank gold coins. And it made me sad that it didn't have the original actual pentacle star on it. And that just made me realize how far I had come from when I started looking into this. It was about 5 years ago that my divorce happened. It was about 2 years after the divorce that I started looking into other esoteric options. And that was 3 years ago. So it's been roughly about 5 years since I've been to a Christian church and since I've really read my Bible. And I'm finally at a point where I feel ready to read the Bible again instead of feeling triggered. For a very long time, I had a very hard time even thinking about reading the Bible or hearing references to Christianity in one way or another. My heart would constrict because it felt like people were telling me what to believe. And the most beautiful thing, I mentioned this in the intro video, but one of the most significant and beautiful things that I have taken away from my spiritual journey up to this point is take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Because as I've said, it put me in the power. Instead of me being the one, oh, tell me what to believe, I need to know, and I need to fit in this certain box and do the right thing. Instead it was, no, take a deep breath, feel inside your body, and feel for yourself what feels right. Because again, in my Christian upbringing, if I read something in the Bible that didn't really feel right, and I talked about that, I would be told, oh, that feeling is because you're being tempted by the devil. Almost anything that was contrary to the Bible, or I should say really the interpretation that the Assemblies of God has of the Bible, because there's a lot of different interpretations. But if you went outside those interpretations, if you went outside the Assemblies of God doctrine and dogma, or you started questioning certain things, it was of the devil. You were being tempted, you were being led astray. So you learn pretty quickly to not listen to your body. You shut down your senses in your body, and it's just, okay, this is what I believe because this is what I was taught. And if I think differently, I'm wrong. I need to think this specific way. And I don't agree with that anymore. Early on in the divorce, I was recommended these 2 books called Reading the Bible Again for the First Time and Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. I will talk more about these books and other books I plan to be reading in another video, which will be linked in the description down below if you want more specifics of the books I will be going through. I found some other apocryphal texts, the Nag Hammadi library, Jewish texts. I got a Quran and some other Islamic texts as well. I'm a big statistic number person, so I took a very long time trying to put these in a particular order, which all will be in that other video. Another thing I said in the intro video is I believe every religion has truth to it. I also believe every religion has human manipulation in it. So I have come to a point where I'm ready to read the Bible again. And I want to read and feel for myself what feels right. And what feels right for me while I'm reading it this time through might be different to what I feel the next time I read it through. And what I feel likely will be different than what you feel. So I am hoping you're gonna join me in this long project of mine. I really just want to sense and feel for myself what parts of the Bible have significance. And one part that I do always remember is the beginning of Proverbs, where wisdom calls out in the streets. It's this personification of wisdom. Or depending on your translation of the Bible, it would say Sophia calls out in the streets. And so Sophia was really an inspiration for this. Because why should I be putting this online? I don't know. I just feel called that I'm supposed to be reading through this and posting these videos online and sharing it with others. My purpose in sharing my thoughts and perspectives while I'm reading through is in no way to convince you to think and interpret the books exactly as I do. Not at all. What I do hope is that maybe something I'll say will spark a new idea for you. And I hope that in the comments down below as we read through these together, that you also will write your perspectives. And by reading through your perspectives and your interpretations and your insights and your wisdom, that it'll spark new ideas in me that I didn't get when I read through. So I really hope that this can be a positive and respectful back and forth sharing of different perspectives. Not about finding the right answer, but about finding the right answer for me and for you to feel and determine the right interpretation and the right feelings for you. I hope to see you in future videos.